Bukola, can we make sure that we have access to share myself or Gabriela? We have PowerPoints that need to be shared. Okay, Gabriela, do you have access to? Perfect, we do. Great. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Gabriela Lemus. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Excellent.
Gabriella, we can see it, but I think it's it's not in presenter view.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. You're good at this. So good afternoon. I almost said good morning. It's such a pleasure to have everyone here. We are here to talk today on the issue, very broad, huge topics, immigration, human rights, and environmental justice. I don't know what made us think that we could do this in this short time span. But I do feel that we have a lot to say, a lot of experience, and a lot of love on these topics that we want to share with all of you. Um, Today, you have as your humble moderators myself, Gabriela, with Maryland Latinos Unidos, my colleague Walkiria Pu from the Centro de Apoyo Familiar, or the Center for Assistance to Families. Our very esteemed panelists are okay, Olofun, Fumi, I'm going to do my best. Olofun Milayo Chinekezi from the National Academy of Medicine, Semeji Aztlán and Hilda Villegas from La Mujer Obrera, Anika Forrest from the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and Andrea Gallegos Montilla from SAMU First Response. I hope I did not butcher anyone's name. So we have several goals we wanted to accomplish today as part of this discussion. We want to explore the impacts of climate change on migration patterns, sort of broadly, but also thinking about environmental justice and how that integrates into not only the policies, but how vulnerable populations are experiencing, certain types of moments and crises that lead them to leave their countries. But also when they arrive, how do environmental justice issues, how they can impact them in the welcoming communities. Secondly, we want to examine human rights implications of migration in very general terms, but also related to climate-induced migration, because along every path of the journey, you're going to have issues related to food access, water, shelter, protection, not just from the elements, but from exploitation and abuse. And then lastly, address the needs of local communities facing environmental stresses in the United States already. And then we're going to focus, though, on this idea of equitable resource allocation for everyone involved. We do not like seeing communities being pitted the ones against the other, and we do not want to displace communities that are already historically in one space. So we're going to have a deep discussion around the needs in that area. We hope as a takeaway that as you watch this, that you'll gain a deeper understanding of how global and local communities, one, can support equitable access to resources, but also how global points have domestic impacts and vice versa. And additionally, we want to highlight how organizations, governments, local, state, national, in the US, and international bodies can collaborate to effectively address the growing crisis of climate change, but also climate induced migration and the broader social and human rights impacts. So we have three general short objectives: raise awareness of the intersection between all three of these topics, highlighting the roles of policies and frameworks in protecting migrants and welcoming communities, and lastly, I think between all of us, we have enough actionable insights that we could probably uh, think through how resources can be allocated in a way that's not just effective but equitable for the migrants themselves, but more importantly, in some cases, for the communities that are welcoming them. So we thank you. And these are all our logos. We hope you will put comments in the chat or questions. We appreciate you. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague and friend who will now begin moderating, Walkiria Pu.
Thank you, Gabriela. Everybody else that is joining us. It is a great opportunity. Thank you to all the speakers that are here, the volunteer their time to share such a great information that we need. And I would love to start, asking one of our panelists to share her PowerPoint where you guys will be able to see more in depth, in deep, um, more of the work that she's been doing. Olufumilayo Shikenezi. I hope I did it well as well, from the National Academy of
You're gonna start with Anika.
Oh, we're gonna start with Anika. Okay, sorry. We'll start with Anika first. And Anika, if we can start then with you with your presentation, um, that will be great. And please hold your questions and make sure that you share questions at the end.
Or put them in the chat. We'd love
Put
to
it on
have
your
see them
correct.
as we're thinking, and any comments you may have as to what we're discussing. Go ahead, Anika.
Great. Greeting all, and thank you so much. On my end, it looks like it's sharing, so if it's not,
It is. It is.
button,
It's
great.
beautiful. I'm still in
Uh,
love.
So, by way of short introduction, my name is Anika Forrest. I'm the Legislative Director for Domestic Policy at the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which is a Quaker lobby and advocacy organization based in DC, but with representation and members all across the country. I particularly lead our migration policy work. And in concert with my colleagues on our climate team and peace building team, FCNL has really been looking at the intersection of climate and migration, but also conflict, knowing that there really is a nexus between them all. And so I'm going to take some time sharing about our work, the principles in which we come to it, and sort of where we see the policy conversation around climate migration at this moment. So the Friends Committee on National Legislation comes to this work not only from a place of human rights, but also of faith. Right now, I'm sharing with you an excerpt from what is a Quaker statement on migration, when Quaker organizations back in December of 2020 came together, really synthesizing the Quaker belief system around migration and welcome. And so it was Quaker organizations and bodies internationally, some focused on policy, some focused on advocacy, others who are practitioners on the ground, really thinking about what the calling is around migration. For the Friends Committee on National Legislation, for more than 80 years, we have operated with the mission of being an insistent voice for peace, for equity, and for justice for all of humanity, understanding that everyone is worthy of the right to live dignified, full, healthy, and safe lives. And you see a lot of that coming to life in the principles and values and points that are made testament in this Quaker statement on migration. As an organization, we are ever striving towards policies that don't villainize or punish people for seeking respite, protection, or opportunities, because we know movement is a human right and it's an international principle and one that the US also uphold. But when thinking about climate, we also know that we have to think about an earth restored so that migration is not forced or rooted in despair. And so we couple that moral calling with also thinking about the realities of migration, the precursors of migration, the drivers, whatever terminology you tend to use. For us as an organization, it really is, again, to anchor it, is looking at that inextricable relationship and intersection between migration, climate, and yes, conflict. So from natural disasters to environmental degradation to the scarcity and equitable distribution of resources, famine, poverty, disease, violent conflict, we all know that these all have a cyclical role in which they play when it comes to displacement and forced migration. when we look at recent studies and reports, for example, the World Bank's Groundwell had a research that came out recently that by 2050, it's anticipated that 216 million people would experience displacement within their own countries due to climate change. And we know, we already see that that always comes with global migratory impacts as well. And so the work that FCNL does in concert with our beliefs of loving thy neighbor, no exceptions, that we must welcome the stranger. We promote policies that take that witness and that understanding into reality. And also underscoring and stressing our principles and the viewpoints of being global citizens. A harm we sometimes fall into, often unintentionally in migration work, is having these unintentional morality impositions based on the type of migration, asylum seeker, refugee, climate migrant, whatever it may be. And the truth is that all fleeing disasters, tragedies, atrocities are deserving of humanitarian protection. And so that is the grounding for our work. Thinking about witness in action, thinking about faith in action. And so I want to highlight three particular areas of work that we have been engaged in more recently at this intersection of thinking about climate migration, but also knowing that it's not just about who we welcome, but how we welcome and what happens once people reach a new host country or a country, a home country. It cannot be underscored that there, and I'm sure many on this call are well familiar, there's no clear delineated codified legal protection for climate migrants in the United States. And so when we think about what's happened recently in the policy world, you had the White House under the Biden administration in October of 2021 release a seminal first of its kind report on the impact of climate change on migration. And it outlines a lot of necessities for there to be continued studies and attention and solutions, knowing that climate migration is going to increasingly become a conversation for not only the United States, but the world. And since then, we have seen climate resilience efforts from the State Department to USAID. We have seen asylum officers and refugee officers receive guidance about how protections can also have connections to climate induced migration. We've seen temporary protected status as one of the humanitarian pathways also be used increasingly for folks experiencing displacement, but nothing has been codified. But we do know that there are conversations happening. So the Climate Displaced Persons Act is one example, a bill that is meant to fill in this critical deficit in US migration and climate policy in creating a definition for climate displaced persons and allowing there to be a visa option for people who have been forced to leave their home due to some climate related disaster. And this acknowledges instances that overlap with and converge with food scarcity, discrimination, persecution, and human rights violations. It is not something that Congress has passed or either chamber has passed, but we do know this is a really critical conversation and one in which we need to build upon. FCNL has also been doing work around the Destination Reception Assistance Act, which was recently introduced in Congress this summer, thinking about what are the resources and critical services we give to migrants, asylum seekers, parolees when they enter the US. So from workforce development to job training, paid apprenticeship, legal services, rental and utility assistance, ensuring that people are on the path to healthy, sustainable lives with medical and mental health assistance, with case management, and that they can be on a way of being self-supporting and self-sufficient as well, benefiting themselves, their families, and their new communities. In some ways, this is meant to complement programs we already see, like the Shelter and Services Program, but that one is rooted more in short-term services, immediate response, whereas the Destination Reception Assistance Act, which would be hosted as proposed under the Office of Refugee Resettlement, would be thinking about that medium to long-term resettlement. We also do work, I don't lead it, but our climate team does, on international climate assistance work. So thinking about adaptation, sustainability, resilience work, so that the causes of climate induced tragedies and disasters can be mitigated, and that folks who are experiencing it on the ground and having lived experience can be at the forefront and have agency in how the things are happening and changes are being made in their communities. The last thing I will use and sort of quickly wrap up is that the US, as a major contributor of global climate change, has a moral, a strategic, and a profound responsibility to provide resources for those who are experiencing climate harms, but also to support and create real solutions for climate migrants. When we look internationally, the US is not the entity and state protecting majority of the world's displaced. In fact, it's not even most global North nations. We know it's countries like Colombia and Turkey. We know the continent of Africa hosts 1/3 of the world's displaced population. And so the conversation really has to be in terms of an international framework, what nations like the United States and the global North owe, and also remembering that climate displacement is not only an international conversation. In the last decade alone, hundreds of thousands of people in the United States have also experienced displacement. And so I look forward to unpacking a lot of these conversations and work throughout the remainder of this discussion with my colleagues on this call, but I'll stop there.
Thank you. That's amazing. Appreciate your input. And again, people feel free to put the questions on the chat as we move on. For sake of time, we're gonna move on to the next presentation. And at the end, we have some questions that we're gonna be asking to each of the panelists. So now, Juanmi, you are the one from the National Academy of Medicine, and she'll be sharing also a great presentation on climate community network.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to attempt to share. You all, please let me know if you're seeing the right thing. So, are you all seeing just
Yes.
the slide?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Fumi Chinakesi. I work as a program officer with the National Academy of Medicine, and today I will be talking about the National Academy of Medicine's Climate Communities Network. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. So the NAM is one of 3 academies constituting the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And we do a number of things, but specifically today, I'll be talking about one of our programs. We have a number of programs on different subject matters, but I'll be talking about one of our programs, which is called sort of our NAM Grand Challenge. So we have a number of grand challenges. This one in particular is focused on climate. And then I'll be talking about a subset of this Climate Grand Challenge, which is the Climate Communities Network. And this is our largest grand challenge to date. So this is just a visual. The National Academy of Medicine, I believe it was 2019, 2020 launched the Grand Challenge on Climate Change, Human Health, and Equity. It has 5 different pillars. I will be talking about the Climate Communities Network today, as I shared. But just taking a step back before honing into the CCN, the Climate Communities Network, just did want to share a little bit more information about this overall grand challenge. The goal is to improve and protect human health, well-being, and equity by working to transform systems that both contribute to and are impacted by climate change. So you can see on this slide, there's some of our strategic objectives, a couple of highlights about the Grand Challenge, but really wanted to just share that overarching goal because it feeds really well into what we'll be talking about today. So the Climate Communities Network, as I've shared already, is one of 5 pillars of the Climate Grand Challenge. Specifically, the CCN was created to center and amplify the expertise of communities that are most impacted by climate change. We are really focused on community-led action as it pertains to addressing related health inequities. We are committed to engaging communities as equal partners that is embedded into our values and principles. We are also committed to convening community leaders as well as other partners to share practices, learn from one another, and most importantly, co-design solutions. And the other thing that we are committed to doing is, as I shared already, sort of amplifying and highlighting the solutions that already exist within this network. There's a wealth of expertise, a wealth of amazing work going on, which you'll hear a little bit about today, actually. But yes, that is the CCN in a nutshell. And our structure is such that we as the NAM really see ourselves as a facilitator, as a convener, really connecting community leaders, which you'll see we have 18 community leaders who work for community-based organizations. They make up the membership of the network, so they are CCN members. And then we have CCN strategic partners, who are a complementary group of multi-sector organizations who really are committed to supporting the work of the members at that local level. And we really wanted to take a hyper-local approach to the CCN, just really seeing what we could do as a national organization and how we can leverage our platform to really create some hyper-local solutions that are scalable, right? So we're still focused on systemic change and structural change, but this is the structure of the network. So the 18 members and strategic partners are like our first cohort. I wanted to talk about our values and principles a little bit. When we first launched the CCN, it was really important to us to have community agreements and shared values and principles. So we went through a process of really thinking through what we want the network to stand for. And you'll see a lot of these values and principles sort of coming up as we talk about human rights and climate change and environmental justice work. So I won't read through all of them, but you'll notice the first, I think, 3 or 4 really have a focus on centering voices that have been historically and currently disrespected, ignored, and silenced. This includes displaced communities, really having communication that values all voices, actively, courageously challenging and dismantling unjust systems, and really wanting to be accountable to the communities that we serve. Um, so with that, I'll just share a few of my reflections. As I was preparing for this presentation, I really wanted to highlight the multi-pronged approach to environmental justice that exists when we think about climate change and human rights. So at a high level, when population vulnerabilities are overlooked, or even worse, exploited, we know that human rights violations are inevitable. And many of our human rights are threatened in the face of climate change, which is only, a growing issue and a growing concern. And so when we think about disproportionate climate impacts, it's important to understand that they are both driven and exacerbated by structural discrimination. So these are the policies and systems that really place certain groups at a greater disadvantage than others. So with environmental justice, we're really seeking to eradicate environmental threats to our livelihood and well-being that are a result of multiple and intersecting forms of the discrimination that I've just described. Ultimately, environmental justice with the CCN, we know that we must advocate for preventive infrastructure, to protect against these disproportionate impacts, but also the infrastructure to support an equitable and humane response. So it has to be both. And so we're really focused on taking this sort of approach with the network. Some considerations that are specific to, immigrant populations. We know that this group faces unique challenges that are worsened in the context of the climate crisis. We think about things like repeated displacement and loss of security, which turns into the loss of basic needs that we've heard about, minimal opportunities for civic engagement, illegal detention or inhumane living conditions, something that's really, really important, prejudice, political discourse, and media portrayal. We know this contributes to social norms and just how we as a society sort of see and respond to what's happening. Inadequate or non-existent disaster response, and then lack of inclusive, culturally sensitive, or trauma-informed care. Not just the lack of the care, but sometimes it's just lack of access. We also need to consider additional layers of susceptibility, right, within this population. So children, those that are pregnant or immunocompromised, those with disabilities, they must also be considered. We really have to take a holistic view of this issue. And all of this has implications for the policies that govern multiple things, multiple systems, our healthcare system, education, economic, and legal systems. So really excited to talk more with you all. during this presentation and for you all to hear from the rest of our panelists. But I did want to just highlight really quickly, the CCN, how we see our role in sort of this pronged issue. So beyond disaster response and relief, CCN really, as I mentioned, is focused on addressing structural drivers. This looks like, our impact areas of capacity building, funding, policy, research, and data. So these are our impact areas because they really help us get at some of these structural issues. Right now, we're working with communities that are part of this first cohort of 18 members to develop community action plans. And these are specifically intended to ultimately inform and activate local, state, and federal decision makers, but also funders. We know that funding is really critical to moving a lot of this work forward. Leveraging innovative methods for data collection and surveillance, and then identifying and expanding existing partnerships with various sectors, which is really important to us. And I have no idea how I am on time. I apologize if I'm talking really quickly. I'm just trying to get through it so we have time to hear from everyone else. But yes, action plans I've already talked about. We're also doing forums to discuss critical perspectives with key players. So really being able to connect those on the ground perspectives to organizations, resources that can really help to move the work forward. And then we're trying to organize ourselves regionally as well. These will be work groups that can implement scalable interventions across multiple of our impact areas, including policy, including youth engagement. Ultimately, the impact we want to have is to transform unjust systems into ones that equitably protect and prioritize the health and well-being of communities most impacted by climate change. And we specifically included that word holistic for all the reasons that I shared previously. I will highlight on this panel, we do have a few of our CCN members. So just really excited to be in conversation with them as well as you all today. So you can see their profiles. These actually live on our CCN website. You can learn a little bit more about their organizations, their priority issues, their vision for the future, the strengths that they bring to this work, which was really important for us to highlight. And yeah, I will stop there. Thank our sponsors and thank you all. This is our general email. And if you want to sign up for our mailing list,
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was amazing presentation. And yes, please take a picture of that. If you didn't get it at the end of the presentation, we'll make sure you all get contact information. Thank you for the comments that have been put on the chat. I appreciate that. Alma, thank you. All the way from Mexico. They're watching us and they find this to be a great topic. We believe that as well. So thank you. We're going to move on with the next presenter. Again, we want to make sure that we have time for some questions, additional questions that we're going to be asking. But I want to go for the next presenter, Andrea Gallegos Montilla from SAMU for response. Andrea, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me try to share my screen so that you can see our presentation. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me try. I don't know if I'm seeing something very weird in here, so 1 second. Oh, try to do this. Okay, here we go. My apologies for that. We are SAMU First Response. We are, I am Andrea Gallegos. I'm the managing director. I have the pleasure of working with an amazing team of caring, compassionate, very professional team of people that provides a welcoming reception to the to this area for the migrants that are arriving in the DMV, in DC and in Maryland in particular. I wanted to share some of the work that we've been doing in our mission to empower and save lives, and especially as we are, SAMU First Response is a humanitarian nonprofit that is part of the larger network of SAMU SA that started over 4 decades ago in Seville, Spain, which is where our headquarters are. We began the work in the hopes of providing our model and services to unaccompanied minors, as we usually do in Europe with all of the migrants that are arriving, in particular to Spain. However, when the buses started coming to the area in April 2022, we quickly began working first as volunteers, but then to formally provide with larger networks of organizations to provide that reception and respite services in the area. Since then, we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary. We have served over 14,500 asylum seekers that were arriving in our nation's capital. And our current operation, as I was mentioning, is both the reception and respite, in which we provide that dignified welcome with hot meals, with providing them with the basic needs so that they can get they can start the process of recovering after their journeys. And we provide a few things like clothing, refreshments, hygiene support. And then we also connected them with their sponsors and helped them with travel arrangements, making sure that all of the essentials were covered. And after that, providing additional information and resources, where they were staying in the area or they had a final destination elsewhere. Our mission as a nonprofit is to provide humanitarian aid to vulnerable populations during times of crisis, which is what we've been doing since we started. This is some of the data of the work that we've done. We've served over 3,000 families, it says 15,000 individuals so far. We no longer receive buses from Texas and Arizona, but we do continue to see many families that are arriving with other transportation arrangements in different areas in the DMV. So we offer them that support as they arrive. This is some of the data, some of the information. This is only on the Maryland side. We've provided support to over 5,000 individuals. This is a little bit of the information of where they're going after they stay with us, their mode of arrival, and some of the main countries that we've received, the majority of which are from Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Nicaragua, and other countries. This is a significant list of countries and languages that in which we are providing the services. We are mainly seeing Spanish speakers going through our doors, but we also have seen a significant increase in Haitian population and also migrants from West Africa. This is a little bit of the age ranges that we are seeing on this side of the U.S. So many children, and then adults, young adults. Basically, the majority are between 20 to 29, and this is the cumulative information. So some of the things that we've seen and how it has changed in this past 2 years since we started the operation back in April 2022, volunteering with the other organizations receiving the buses in the area. We have been in different times utilized in different spaces to provide that welcome and that respite. We were fortunate to count with the support of the Montgomery County authorities in Maryland that allowed us to open a respite center that provided that initial support to the migrants for a short period of time, as we were seeing a lot of fluctuation between and with the buses and the arrivals. So we were initially providing services for 2 nights, 3 days, just to provide those basic services and the connections and information for them to continue their journeys. Then that has changed through time as well to allow for more time, to allow for connections to case management services and to other services that they need on the ground, especially as we have seen a shift in terms of how many families are wanting to stay in this area versus those that used to just transit this area going to other main cities and destinations. So we opened the first center in the area in June of 2022. And then throughout this first year, we provided services in different churches and different organizations that opened the doors until in DC, where the buses were arriving. An Office of Migrant Services was created, and with the Office of Migrant Services, we started operating a center that is both reception and respite, and has allowed for families to stay for a significant amount of time without eh, having to go or stay on the streets, because that's what we wanted to avoid. Be able to provide the services to those families that are arriving. As you may know, there were also some migrants that were staying in hotels at the beginning. That operation continues, but has been reduced, and we have been taking the lead on this center in DC to provide the services. And there is a coordination between the areas and the jurisdiction here in the DMV to be able to provide a good coordinated support to those that are arriving. We have started to see, as we had seen a change in a trend in arriving outside of the buses early in 2023, and then that became the norm. Many of them arriving without substantial connections or community support at the beginning. And we're seeing many different families going through different pieces or receiving misinformation, which has produced a challenge in our operation. So let me share a little bit more of what we are doing in our centers over the past 2 years. We not only understood that there were a lot of different needs that were unmet, and that we needed to accommodate to what we were seeing, observing on the ground in terms of the needs. And we expanded our scope of work, offering different services to complement that essential reception and the initial respite. And we started incorporating into our operation different workshops, activities for both adults and kids. We started offering opportunities for them to get emotional support, ESL basic lessons, and we started also providing outreach events and activities so that we can get where they are in the community and be able to offer accurate information, which is always very, very necessary.
And then if the slide moving, it's not moving just in case. We
Thank-
just it's just stop at empowering and saving lives with beautiful kids holding hands.
Okay, let me
Just
see.
in case.
Thing. I'm just changing this. Can you see it?
No, it's not moving.
Let's see. Give me just one
You
second.
probably need to restart, stop sharing and then share it again.
more time. Can you see it now?
Now it's moving. Yep. Thank you.
Data. Okay. Did you see this one?
No.
No? Okay. So this is where I think I was at. So we are expanding some of the activities that we do inside our respite centers, but also outside in the community for them to be able to receive information and also to bring together those that are newly arriving with existing local communities of migrants that can provide that support network and provide information and can connect them to resources and others that are available in their communities. Also, I just added the holiday and birthday celebrations, which are so important. This is a way to um, share all of the cultural components and everything that we bring as migrants. We have different celebrations, we have different holidays, so we try our best to do activities not only for them to get familiar with the holidays in the US, but also to share some information and sharing with um, what they do, the typical activities that they do back in their countries, and they're bringing with them. So it's always a very nice opportunity to share. And just smile because that's also so important. So we've also started providing some additional resources for them target to um, to their needs to be able to start navigating the different systems as they arrive and connecting them to longer term services. So case management, but also educational vocational training too. Legal clinics and resources for so that they can continue with that important piece of their journeys, and also information on how the healthcare system works or the school system works, and all of these navigation pieces that are so important as they arrive. So besides those of the emotional support and relaxation, breathing techniques, and many others that we try to provide for all of the migrants in these 2 years, we've grown in many different ways, and we're super blissful to count with the support of so many wonderful organizations that are providing support in one way or another, and that are making this operation truly unique, but also very well connected. There's still many things to do, but it is important that we all work together in these networks that have been created for support of the migrants that are arriving, and also integrating with local communities is super important. So this is the work that us partners need to continue doing in the future. So some of the examples of working with partners is that it has allowed us to be able to provide wellness opportunities for them. Legal assistance, which, as I was mentioning, is so important. Entrepreneurship trainings, and or a way to start building that path, whether that is with work opportunities or educational opportunities, and also a lot of different materials that they need as they embark on their knowledge in the different systems. In terms of housing assistance, which is one of the main challenges that we see in our communities, in other types of orientations, which are always so needed. And this is also important to mention as we think about what's next, what is needed. Um, as I was mentioning, the work with partners is absolutely key. The local community in each receiving area is super important in this network. And all of the volunteering efforts are also very important in this operation, not only because they provide essential donations in kind and or with time, but also it allows us to work more efficiently and be able to try our best to connect with the existing resources and institutions and entities so that they have access. There's so many volunteering opportunities, and there's so many organizations that are doing such great work, but there's still a lot more that can and needs to be done. So this is one of the highlights. I don't know how I am in time. And okay, so some of the needs and gaps that I have identified relate to the fact of the need of systems that can provide additional services to the families as they are getting into their communities and um, in an adjustment process so that they can get all of the information that is needed for them. And also increasing the opportunities for them to access affordable housing. We know, again, housing topic is a very significant challenge for many of us, especially in big areas that are we face so many issues with housing. The other component is the pro bono or general legal services, in particular representation. We have been able to provide general orientations and support and sessions that are open to the public, but when it comes to representing them in their cases, that is where we've seen significant challenges. And go back to the point of access to the information and understanding of what exists in their local communities and what can be provided where they're staying. So with that, just wanted to thank all of you and the rest of the panelists, and I look forward for the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was amazing. Appreciate your presentation and all the information that was presented to all of us. Again, I encourage those who are listening, please put your questions on the chat because at the end we want to have time to get those to get to them. I will go and present last but not least. We have La Mujer Obrera, Semeli de Aslan, and also Hilda Villegas. They'll be presenting also an amazing presentation. Semeli, you gonna start, Semeli?
Hi, do you all see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we do.
Okay. My name is Semeli de Aslan, and I'm here with my colleague Hilda Villegas, and we're with La Mujer Obrera. We are located on the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso, Texas, working in an immigrant community and dealing with a number of issues. On the picture here, you'll see our children, Diego and Ameyali, in 2017, fighting against the polluting semi-trucks coming from Mexico, Ciudad Juarez, and the maquiladoras there. Can they see? And our campaign for El aire limpio es un derecho. Clean air is a right. Are you able to see this next slide?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. La Mujer Obrera has been in El Paso working with women workers since 1981. A lot of our work was born because of the women workers here on the border fighting for their rights, mostly Mexican, Spanish-speaking women who were being exploited in the factories. And when NAFTA passed in 1994, all of those jobs were eliminated. And so the women started to organize to fight for justice and for their community. A lot of those jobs went to Ciudad Juarez, and now we're dealing with the environmental effects as well as the economic effects of that transition. Just to know, El Paso we lost the most jobs in the whole United States when NAFTA was passed, and it was mostly women workers. We are located in Barrio Chamizal. Our neighborhood is directly kissing against the border on the frontera. We have El Puente Libre, which connects to Ciudad Juarez, but we are on the directly facing the international borders. In our neighborhood, we have over 7,000 residents, predominantly Spanish speaking and of Mexican descent. We are the most immigrant neighborhood in the city of El Paso and one of the poorest neighborhoods in the nation. The demographics include mostly women and children. As you can see from this map, back in the day of El Paso, the print is really difficult, but this is our neighborhood in the red, and you will see on the side we're referred to as Mexican peons. And those are the words that the government used to describe the community here. And our community was defined or classified as hazardous because of the immigrant population here, according to the powers that be. Today, our neighborhood is one of the most unjust sort of situated neighborhoods, in the sense that in the yellow, that is distinctly where residents live, that's zoned residential, and the purple is zoned industrial. It's surprising, or not surprising, but it's essentially environmental racism to surround our community with industry. Mostly industrial waste and open air industrial waste facilities, among others. What that does in our community is it's created a compounded effect of injustice. Not only are we mostly women and children, economically disadvantaged, Spanish speaking, and little access to health services, but we have the accumulation of all the industry surrounding us, railroad, the train, the industry catches fire, and because of the international port of entry, El Puente Libre, which is the only free port of entry along the US-Mexico border, it's being exploited by the NAFTA trucks every day, and now it's the second most busiest port of entry, but it's mostly used by the trucks and not by the people, which it was intended for. Because of the environmental racism, our schools are directly situated next to hazardous locations. If you see here, this is directly behind my child's elementary school. The mountain of industrial waste that sits behind us is mostly coming from the maquila factories in Juarez. And so much of that waste is coming from Mexico, where there's little environmental regulations or laws. That industrial waste facility does catch fire multiple times a year, and the lead that's seeping into our playgrounds and our children's school is coming from that source of contamination. Here you see that industrial waste fires. We get about 12 fires per year, but the fire chief has said that is expected to rise because of climate change. And so we are currently working with, or trying to pressure the entities that be to create some accountability and enforcement, because they've been grandfathered into pre-environmental rights sort of exemptions and waivers, like much of our neighborhood. They've currently formed an environmental health task force to attempt to address the issue, but we're finding it very lopsided in trying to get the community's concerns. We also have a bus hub that was built at school in 2020 with over 150 buses. You would never see a bus hub of that size located on a school campus because of its polluting nature. Most bus hubs are located away from communities, but not in our neighborhood, where so many waivers, exemptions, and continuous environmental racism persist. And so despite our efforts to try and stop it, they dismantled a historic baseball field and green space and replaced it with 150 polluting buses. The scientists have told us that it is equivalent to our children that are on campus smoking a pack a day, the exposure. We also have been protesting, as the photo of our children showed earlier, for years, ever since NAFTA was passed, the encroachment of the semi trucks in our community. They've been going through our community for years, decades, crossing through our neighborhood, in front of our schools. And so in 2019, we were able to push a lot of those trucks away from our high school. But the planners just moved the problem to our neighboring community, unfortunately. So currently we're trying to change that. Here we have our residents demanding justice in regards to the trucks with the bipartisan infrastructure funding that came for Biden. The Puente Libre, the international port of entry in our neighborhood, was granted $700 million for renovations with the intent for environmental justice. But what we've been seeing is catering to the maquila industry. And so we've been fighting to create buffers and eliminate the truck traffic from this port of entry, as it was intended for the people and not the maquilas. We are waiting for the environmental impact study to be released next month, but we've been pushing and providing our input for the past 2 years. We want the trucks out, so we have 2 options on the table: to remove the trucks or to expand for the trucks. Oh. I know.
Oh, we don't hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'll just move on to the next slide. Here are some of the children in the neighborhood. If you see the drawing of, that's their school, with the International Port of Entry and the freeway right next to their school. When they expanded the freeway, they actually took 10 feet off of the school to create that freeway. So literally the school is on the freeway with all the trucks is on top of their school, which is exposing the children to high levels of pollution. That school, Zavala Elementary, was categorized as one of the most polluted schools in the city. Yet when they closed down schools in our neighborhood, and the residents were pushing to keep the one in the center open that was within walking distance, the racist school system closed down the safest school and corralled our children into schools on the edges of industrial zones and next to the freeway. There's a lot of issues for a community like ours that's been essentially exploited and disenfranchised as being predominantly immigrant. We don't have the voting power, but we do have the political push and power to. We have the power to push politicians to address the historic injustices. Our work is rooted in a balance between defending and creating. And so the residents here are providing the solutions to the climate crisis that they didn't create or contribute to. And so in uplifting our culture and our traditions, we are positioning ourselves as having the solutions to the crisis. Here's just a photo. We had the EPA come for a toxic tour to see these things that we've showed you today. And we did travel to Washington, D.C. to fight for stronger policies, specifically against the soot and smog produced by the semi-trucks. And these are just some QR codes. If you're interested in our struggle, you could see the videos from us demanding justice in regards to the environmental issues that we're facing. Hilda's going to talk about, or will share with the question portion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So as you just heard, we have a number of different issues and sectors working across the intersection of immigration, human rights, and environmental justice. And when these things intersect, as you know, Semeyi just showed us very graphically, and then Anika has to go to Congress and figure out how to solve it. And you know, Andrea on the ground is looking for you know, there's a crisis situation. How do we manage that? And Fumi, you know, goes to the National Academy of Medicine and you know, like everything is like distressing and distressful, but it's also causing very real human damage. And um, I think it's in that sense that we're really thinking about the way we how do we what's our way forward, right? Because it seems insurmountable. Even the smallest of these challenges is really, um, you know, incredible, and requires resources. And something every single one of you mentioned, I just want to highlight is collaboration and communication in your own communities, across communities, and with the migrants themselves, but also with our local governments, our state governments, and our national governments, and sometimes with on a multilateral scale, um, because obviously migrants are coming from all over the world. You heard the listing of new migrants coming into Maryland as an example. It's I've been involved in this work for many moons, and the new arrival of the Cuban community and the Venezuelan community is something I haven't seen in a long time. Probably I won't tell you how old I am, but a long time. At any rate, so I'm going to hand it over to Valkyria to open up with our first question. We don't have a lot of time. We're down to about 15 minutes. So we were going to ask each one of you a very specific, narrow question. But I think in the interest of time, perhaps we should go to the cross-cutting question so that we can all have an opportunity. Why don't you start, Valkyria?
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. I was being impressed, taking a lot of notes, and then I realized that I have a copy of the slides. So I said I might as well concentrate on listening. Amazing presentation. Yeah, I will ask the question, and please feel free to go around the room and answer. What are the best practices for collaboration between healthcare system, public health entities, crisis management team, local CVOs to address the dual challenges that we see in climate immigration and equity in low-income communities? Whoever wants to go first is fine, and I will put it in the chat as well so we can see it again.
Anybody want to take a stab at that? Little question. How do we collaborate? That would be the essence of it.
We could go ahead and contribute.
Go for it. You're doing it in real time, so.
So La Mujer Obrera works to uplift the traditions and customs of the residents of the Chamizal. We view ourselves as part of a lineage of knowledge and struggle, in which we pick up where others have left off. Our struggle and resistance is traced all the way back to where we were originally from as people. In that lineage, Barrio Chamizal residents have preserved traditions and customs that we view as counter to the destruction of the earth and the climate. Barrio Chamizal's residents do water harvesting. They consume less because they value more what they have worked hard for. They conserve energy by socializing outside with others in community. They cook their traditional foods instead of mass consumerism. They value, respect, and protect the plants and view them as part of the community and family. Our way of life, tradition, and customs, which are rooted in the relationship with the earth and with each other, is the solution to the climate crisis and what slows down climate change. How we as people acknowledge this, how we preserve it through providing the space to share amongst each other, and how we ensure that future generations understand this and also continue their part on preserving these ideas and practices is one of our main strategies as we continue to defend the right to community through the organization of families as well. Only us can defend community and create alternatives.
Can I kind of hop in with a follow-up? So I'm listening to you, and I mean that's just insanely powerful. We need to get more of this information out in our communities, and I'm thinking about each of your work, and I'm just wondering, you know, how do you blend these key human rights concerns with, like the policies that need to be evolved? Because it really it's about building a map as we try to collaborate both locally and nationally, and hopefully at some point across borders.
Process.
Right.
Prioritize their voice.
Exactly.
you're asking me?
It's for all
You're
of you. It's
oh,
for
to all of
everyone.
us.
But if you
Okay.
have a specific answer, hop in again.
I,
But we have other speakers too. So anybody who wants to
Okay.
jump in. If you don't, I'm going to go teacher on you. I'm going to start pointing fingers.
I just want to emphasize that it's important to prioritize the communities themselves as contributors to that policy making process, where we see a lot of that has been neglected or because of racism, it's perpetuated. They don't feel like the solutions are embedded within the communities themselves.
Anika, some of that resonates with me from what you were saying about the Quaker, the way the Quaker process. There's a spiritual aspect to it. I just feel like there's a lot of resonance. Does this type of people-centered approach, is that something that you adopt as well?
Yeah, in simple answer, it's why we do the work, right? Policies have real implications, and you are an effective practitioner when you remember that theories and academia and scholarship is not necessarily expertise. The people who live the ramifications of policies are the experts, and so the work you do with them must be in solidarity. And it's something at the Friends Committee that we take wholeheartedly, and using that to build off and also ensuring within our policy conversations. If we think about migration, if we think about environmental justice, the issues are too interconnected to facilitate some sort of siloed analysis or policy solution. They have to be multifaceted, they have to be layered, and they require true understanding. If we think about climate and environmental based migration, are we talking about climate disaster survivors? Are we talking about agriculturalists and farmers and fishers who have relied on that for their families and for their community industries, and that economic vitality is no longer available to them? Are we talking about folks who have experienced environmental vulnerabilities because of community and equity? Each of those situations is different, and to just lump them under one umbrella is where we go remiss sometimes in thinking about policy solutions. The nuances of particular lived experiences are categorically important.
You're really shaking your head, Andrea. You want to hop in? Because I think a lot of your local work, I mean, you said it, like you have to value the local community.
right, right. And I was just thinking that one of the challenges that we face as a community as a whole is connecting the migrant needs or the needs in general with the opportunities. So in our case, the migrant needs and what they're going through with the social economic needs and opportunities that are there, so that there's that match. I was thinking in some of the like in the US, we have a very um, uh, active society in terms of collaboration, in terms of philanthropy, and of solidarity in general, which with changes and obviously it isn't like that all of the time, and we're seeing a polarization in the topic, so that makes like this is my view
Another
versus
layer.
exactly. um, but I believe that we can find those that common ground and put together a different approach, incorporating what they're seeing, what they're facing, what the communities are experiencing into the next steps for all of us, working as networks, working as groups, trying to understand better and project things that could be more beneficial for the community as a whole as well. So it's trying to understand what the communities are facing really allows us to be able to move forward together with solutions.
Um, yeah, I hear that completely. And so Fumi, I'm going to call on you next, right? But I'm also looking at it from a structural perspective, because we've also, all of us have talked about systems, right? And you're really in that system space, and that has to be hard, right? I mean, are there any thoughts on the more structural level about things we could do to? I mean, I think this, to me, not to toot our horn, but the climate change network, I do feel that it's a really good start to really build those networks across the country, but also understand regionally how we can collaborate. And you've all talked about this collaboration as well. And that was the big question, right? So Fumi.
Yes, thank you. So with the CCN, one of our goals has been to make that connection from local to regional to federal, like really having a through line, right? And plugging in those gaps and really making those connections. One thing that I personally have been reflecting on is that, systems are comprised of people and structures are upheld by people. And I think sometimes, there is a disconnect just in terms of how we think about the work, and I have personally just been challenged by that because we are trying to reach decision makers. We're trying to get to that sort of policy change through our work with the CCN. But that's going to sort of happen almost like person to person, right? Like that human connection, that interaction, really bringing this person together with this person or this community together with this group. Like it's really the connection piece of it all that we're really trying to lean on, and also just not being afraid to challenge the status quo. Like I think sometimes it can feel scary. Like, okay, if we don't do this, then what? If we don't have a system or structure, then what? And so I think just really being in a space where we can uplift the work that's already existing with our CCN members, uplift that, in spaces where real change can occur. But really it's a mindset shift. It's a culture change, like you're changing the way that you think.
Flow.
The way and that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of courage. I think this group has given me even more courage, just seeing all the amazing work that's taking place. So, ultimately we want to make those connections. It's going to take time because it is a culture shift or change, however you want to, talk about it. But I constantly come back to the fact that, systems are comprised of upheld by individuals, and it really is going to take that sort of brick by brick approach, honestly, in a lot of ways to really get to the root and the heart of a lot of these issues. And the last thing I'll say is this is, the answers lie within the communities, but the onus is not on them. And I think sometimes we have a lot of this when we have conversations about solutions, it can sometimes feel almost like extractive, one-sided, very like, okay, now go forth and do the thing. But it really is like a responsibility of these systems to care for the communities that they, want to care for, should be caring for, all of the things. And I think, really making sure that the onus is not just one-sided, that the onus is not solely on communities to fight against conditions that they did not create. I think that's like something that we've consistently have to come back to in our conversations and in conversations with funders, with decision makers, like really understanding what our role is. So yeah.
Well, you got the last word, it looks like. Does anybody want to give us like one or two takeaways, like rapidly, 30 seconds each, 20 seconds each? Because we are down to the last minute. I have hope. Go for it.
And this is really best practice, for collaboration. I think this workshop had definitely reflected that. And I just want to say thank you. And I hope this is not the last time we continue to be in touch. I think there's a lot to do. Great women empowered, doing great things. And, appreciate that.
It was a good mix, wasn't it? Thank you, ladies. You have been amazing, as I knew you would be. And Wakiria, you are the best, as always. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have questions, feel free to send them to us through the University of Maryland. I'm going to put my email in the chat. in case anybody needs to reach us. I should have done that first. Sorry, my apologies. And we are more than happy to share information. Are you open to sharing your PowerPoints should people need them? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank
And
you,
to the
everyone.
next panel, go get them.
Have an amazing one. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.